In early 2023, a $23 billion deal was set in motion that would see the sale of key ports flanking the Panama Canal, an international trade artery of immense strategic importance. The transaction involved Hong Kong-based CK Hutchison, a giant in global port operations, and a consortium led by U.S. financial powerhouse BlackRock. At face value, it was a massive infrastructure sale, but beneath the surface, it was a geopolitical chess move that would not go unnoticed. The ports in question sit at the very entrance of the canal, far more than just cargo hubs. They are gatekeepers to one of the busiest shipping routes on Earth. But just as the agreement appeared to be heading toward closure, an unexpected intervention arose. China, through its regulatory authority, the State Administration for Market Regulation, SAMR, launched an anti-monopoly investigation. The message from Beijing was unmistakable. Not so fast. The move reverberated far beyond corporate boardrooms. It was a bold signal in the intensifying contest for global trade dominance, particularly around critical choke points like the Panama Canal. To understand China's motivations, one must first examine CK Hutchison, the Hong Kong-based conglomerate behind the proposed sale. Founded by billionaire Li Ka-shing, CK Hutchison has grown into one of the most influential players in global trade infrastructure, controlling over 40 ports across continents, from Asia to Europe, Africa to the Americas. At the heart of this deal were 2 ports on either side of the Panama Canal, making them key nodes in the global trade network. This wasn't just about transferring ownership of cargo terminals. It was about influence over commerce between oceans. The sale included 43 ports, but the Panamanian assets were by far the crown jewels. Their location alone made them invaluable, serving as both logistical hubs and strategic assets. CK Hutchison's rise to this level of global influence stems from its deep roots in Asia's economic ascent, led by Li Ka-shing's vision. Under his guidance, the company diversified across sectors like telecommunications, retail, and energy, all while maintaining ports as a central focus. Control over such nodes means control over the direction and efficiency of global trade itself. Enter BlackRock. The American investment titan, led by CEO Larry Fink, manages nearly $10 trillion in assets. For BlackRock and its partners, the acquisition represented more than a financial play. It was about securing a position of leverage in the shifting global trade environment. Control of the Panama Canal's endpoints would grant unprecedented influence over the flow of goods between the Atlantic and Pacific, giving BlackRock's consortium significant sway over global supply chains. With the world economy in flux and geopolitical tensions rising, these ports were no longer just commercial real estate. They were strategic footholds. The implications weren't lost on Washington either. For the United States, the Panama Canal has long represented more than a shortcut between oceans. It is a cornerstone of military mobility and economic strategy, especially in the Western Hemisphere. The idea of foreign, especially non-allied, control over such a vital artery raised red flags across multiple sectors of U.S. policymaking. What appeared to be a commercial transaction was quickly being viewed through the lens of national security. So why does the Panama Canal matter so much? It's a 50-mile strip of water that connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, slashing thousands of miles off shipping routes and saving time and money for global commerce. For the U.S., it remains a strategic asset for defense and economic projection. For China, which has steadily expanded its influence through the Belt and Road Initiative, it's a critical link in its global trade chain. Control of the ports surrounding the canal is a way to shape, or even dictate, the movement of goods on a global scale. The $23 billion deal, then, wasn't just about selling port infrastructure. It was about moving pieces on the global chessboard. With the sale nearing completion, China's SAMR stepped in with its surprise probe. The stated reason: concerns over monopolistic implications and potential foreign domination of a vital maritime passage. But this wasn't just regulatory housekeeping. It was a strategic move, a reminder that Beijing wouldn't remain passive while core infrastructure in its perceived sphere of influence was handed over to Western investors. SAMR's action rippled through financial markets and diplomatic channels alike. China's approach to infrastructure isn't merely commercial. It's deeply intertwined with national sovereignty and long-term security planning. When critical nodes of global trade are up for grabs, Beijing makes it clear that any shift in control, especially one that benefits geopolitical rivals, won't go unchallenged. In that light, the anti-monopoly investigation is less about economic fairness and more about recalibrating global power dynamics. In a world where ports are power and access is influence, the tug-of-war over the Panama Canal's gateways is just one battle in a larger war for control over the arteries that fuel the global economy. The deeper you look into the Panama Canal standoff, the clearer it becomes. This isn't just a regional dispute. It's a reflection of a world in transition, one where economic ambition and military strategy are increasingly blurred, and infrastructure is no longer just about commerce, but about control. This canal, carved through the heart of Central America, once symbolized American engineering might and geopolitical dominance. Now, more than a century later, it's becoming the latest flashpoint in a contest between old power and rising power. China's focus on ports and shipping lanes is no coincidence. From Sri Lanka's Hambantota port to Greece's Piraeus port, Chinese firms, often state-backed, have been acquiring, leasing, or investing in maritime gateways all over the world. This is what analysts call the string of pearls strategy, a web of infrastructure meant to secure China's trade routes and project influence across oceans. The Panama Canal is a crown jewel in that string. It's not just about efficiency, it's about security. If conflict were ever to escalate with the United States or its allies, control, or even partial influence, over these global choke points could determine the speed and effectiveness of China's response. It's also about signaling to the rest of the world, to Africa, to Southeast Asia, to the Middle East. China is showing that it's not afraid to push back, to step in, to dictate terms. It's telling its allies and adversaries alike, we are not observers in the global order. We are architects of it. For the United States, this is a wake-up call, and not just for politicians in Washington. Across defense departments, intelligence agencies, and economic institutions, alarms have been ringing for years. American policymakers understand the stakes. The Monroe Doctrine once positioned Latin America firmly within the U.S. sphere of influence. But now Beijing is challenging that assumption with capital, construction, and quiet diplomacy. What's more, the tools of influence have changed. Where once nations used fleets and armies, today they use investment banks, sovereign funds, and development loans. China has mastered this form of soft power, often delivering what developing nations crave most: infrastructure, fast money, and freedom from Western conditions. No lectures about governance, no strings attached, just ports, railways, energy grids, and digital infrastructure delivered with ruthless efficiency. But this approach isn't without its risks. There are growing concerns about debt diplomacy, countries becoming over-leveraged to Beijing, unable to pay back loans, and forced to make political concessions. Critics point to Sri Lanka as a warning sign, where the government had to lease Hambantota port to a Chinese company for 99 years after failing to repay its debts. Could a similar fate befall others? Could nations like Panama, deepening economic ties with China, one day find themselves caught between two superpowers, with less and less room to maneuver? And then there's the human element. What do the people of Panama want? Or for that matter, what do the citizens of any country involved in this great game think of their role? Often these deals are negotiated behind closed doors, with limited transparency, limited input, and long-term consequences that only become visible years down the line. For the average person, the implications of a port sale or a blocked deal might seem distant, until prices rise, jobs disappear, or sovereignty is quietly chipped away. Back in Washington, Trump's response was as much about domestic politics as it was about global strategy. By framing China's intervention as aggressive and unacceptable, he tapped into a growing American unease about foreign influence and economic decline. He wasn't just warning about China, he was rallying his base, pushing a narrative of America first, and calling for a return to hard power diplomacy. But whether rhetoric alone is enough remains doubtful. China plays the long game, it plans in decades, and it builds while others debate. So where does this go from here? One possibility is escalation, economic, political, even military. As both nations pour resources into securing key corridors, the world could see more contested deals, blocked takeovers, and legal battles. Infrastructure might become the new frontier of Cold War-style competition. But there's another path, however narrow, that leads to cooperation. A path where mutual dependence forces compromise. After all, both nations rely on global trade. Both understand the catastrophic cost of conflict, and both have a stake in keeping the world stable enough to prosper. But let's not be naive. The Panama Canal dispute is a signal, a flare in the sky. It tells us that the post-Cold War era, dominated by a single superpower, is over. What's rising in its place is more complex, more multipolar, and more unpredictable. China's moves are strategic, deliberate, and increasingly bold. The United States' responses are reactive, driven by a mix of legacy power and growing anxiety. And caught in the middle are dozens of nations trying to navigate a world that no longer has one clear leader. The next decade will be defined not by ideology, but by influence. Not by speeches, but by ports, roads, satellites, and supply chains. Power will be measured not just in military strength, but in access. Access to markets, data, and resources. And in that new world, the Panama Canal will remain one of the most critical crossroads. So, what do you think? Is this the beginning of a new kind of global conflict? Or is it simply the natural evolution of rising powers finding their place? Should the US double down or look for a new strategy altogether? And does China's rise mean inevitable confrontation, or the start of a new balance? We want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was China right to block the sale? Is America losing ground or simply adapting? And if you want more content exploring the real stories behind global headlines, the ones that shape our future in ways we barely notice, subscribe and turn on notifications. We're diving deep into the moments no one else is talking about. Thanks for staying with us. Until the next episode, stay sharp, stay informed, and keep watching the world.